Hello, and welcome to Begin Together, a podcast for couples who are healing from infidelity. I am your host, Janae Lindsay, and today I am joined by my friend and fellow therapist, colleague, Kristina Clawson. I'm just going to read you a little bio. She is amazing. But it says Kristina is a licensed marriage and family therapist in Nevada. She's passionate about working with couples, specifically the unique issues and challenges faced by LDS couples. Education and access to good information is important to her, which is why she's working on some self-paced courses to support individuals and couples navigating betrayal. Kristina also teaches for BYU Idaho. When not with clients, you can find Kristina in the pool, cooking, or scheming about her next project. And one other thing that I would add, because I have had the privilege of working with Kristina here at Desert Bloom Recovery, is just she is also trained in deceptive sexuality trauma and has been trained by Dr. Omer Manwala. And so we are going to likely reference him a lot during our conversation. She's exceptional. I've had clients who have worked with her, and I always hear the best feedback possible. So thank you for being here, Kristina. I'm so grateful to have you and pick your brain and hear your wisdom. And I'm just so thankful that you are able to take this time. Yay, welcome, Kristina.
Yay! I'm so excited to be here. I love this. I love Dr. Manwala's model so much. So I'm so excited to talk about it.
Yeah, amazing. So something that Dr. Manwala taught both of us was to transition into extraordinary space when we were talking about heavy realities, things like infidelity, integrity abuse, compulsive entitled sexual behaviors, all of that heaviness, that we can create intentional space for that. And I thought it would be nice to also model that on the podcast before our conversation. So if you are listening in, if all of us can just go ahead and take a nice deep breath and just transition into this space of turning towards these realities, the pain of deceptive sexuality trauma, and just noticing where you are right now, emotionally, physically. I'm tuning into how I'm feeling, and just so grateful again that we can be here together. So, Kristina, I thought you would be the perfect person to have this conversation with, specifically to look at some of the injuries that happen with traditional therapy when it comes to treating deceptive sexuality trauma. I know you have been the therapist in the aftermath of it. Like, people will seek you out specifically because they have had traumatic experiences from other therapists. But can you just share a little bit about why traditional therapy does not work for infidelity injuries or other types of betrayal?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in short, traditional therapy operates under the assumption that each partner is equally responsible for what's happening in the relationship, right? So traditional therapy really focuses on, okay, what's your part? What's your part? How are each of those parts interacting that is causing these issues, communication issues, sexual issues, what have you. And so that doesn't work that well for infidelity or deceptive sexuality trauma because one person is primarily responsible for the patterns that are happening. And so even when there are communication issues or other things happening prior to the relationship, if your goal is to heal from infidelity, you'll really want to focus on what happened, right? What happened during an affair or what happened, what is going on with any kind of addiction. So, deceptive sexuality trauma really comes from the framework that the person who has acted out of their integrity is the person that needs to be focused on first. And so we're not going to put each person's contributions or issues on equal standing at that point in treatment.
So being really clear about who has more accountability in this situation, because
Mhm.
so often traditional couples therapy models will look at each partner as having equal responsibility for the patterns in the relationship dynamics. But like you're naming, deceptive sexuality trauma is really clear that the person who has engaged in those deceptive sexual behaviors actually has a significantly greater role in taking accountability and in having responsibility for that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's where I see, I think some of those injuries really come in, especially in those early stages of treatment for a betrayed partner where, um, someone will come into therapy expecting that, "Hey, I'd like to work on healing the relationship. I don't know how to do that. I don't know what that looks like or even if it's possible." And then to have a professional coming from that perspective can just do a lot of harm.
When you are a couple, let's just say you just discovered some kind of infidelity, or maybe let's use pornography as an example. You just discovered that your husband's been viewing pornography in secret, and then you go into a therapy office, and the therapist, which also, by the way, like takes so much to just get to that point, like
Oh my
finding
gosh.
getting in,
Huge. Yeah.
yeah. And then just like, I don't know if anything comes to mind for you for this, but what are some of the ways that that can kind of go south pretty quickly?
Yeah. When somebody's first coming in.
Yeah, they first come in, they're presenting with, I discovered that my husband has secret pornography use. This is something that was clearly not okay in our marriage.
Oh,
And the
so many options.
therapy
So many possible ways that could go south. So, first, I think just, even asking an immediate thought, right? Or like a subconscious thought that a lot of people have is like, well, what is the sexual relationship like in the marriage? Right? What's the sexual relationship like? And so even going to that automatically creates this assumption that each person, again, has equal responsibility here, right? What is each person's role here? So that's a big one. I think another one could be just asking a lot of questions about what was happening prior to this discovery. So really trying to focus a session away from the infidelity piece or the betrayal piece and really asking a lot of questions about like, well, help me understand what was going on prior to this, right? That gives you a lot of information about where that person's headspace is at and what they see as the main problem.
Mhm. Totally. And as you're naming that, I'm just thinking one of the other things that a therapist I think can do is take their own viewpoints and their own, ideas maybe of like, oh, all men watch porn or something, or like, oh, this is really common,
Mhm.
really normal. Like maybe they're coming from this like quote unquote like sex positive place. And so they think, why is she so upset about this? And they're totally missing the reality that separate from the sexual behavior itself, it's the fact that it was happening in secret. And that's
Mhm.
the part that feels like a massive betrayal, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think coming in with some of those like strong biases and then disregarding almost the client's perception of what happened, right? Like if they consider that a betrayal, if there was secrecy going on, that matters so much more than what you personally think is healthy or not healthy.
Totally. I think as you were sharing, the other thing that was popping up in my brain is like unintentionally then supporting the narrative that the betraying partner has that, see, there was a reason that I did this, you know? Like,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
justified all of this stuff was going on in our marriage beforehand, like she X, Y, or Z. And so therefore I was engaging in this kind of behavior. And somebody who has a secret sexual basement, somebody who's engaging in those behaviors without their spouse's knowledge is going to have their own justifications for why they were doing it. And so often a therapist, just in trying to explore some of those narratives, can actually be supporting them and their justifications, if that makes sense. Is that making sense? Um,
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I've seen that.
and so what is the injury that happens for a partner, let's just use one of these examples. Like, for instance, they're coming in and the therapist is starting to inquire about, like, what does your sex life look like? And how much sex are you having? And how can we make sex feel safe again? Like, that's something that comes up, which is shocking, but it does,
Mhm.
Probably super obvious question here, but how does that then potentially injure the betrayed partner?
Well, okay, if you think about, right, someone who has just had their entire reality destroyed, right, by the person who they believe to be their safe person, and then they're going into the office of somebody who has a qualification that should make them also a safe person, and then to have that experience and to be gaslit and, intentionally or unintentionally, that is hugely harmful for somebody who has just been through some really intense trauma, with betrayal, than to have another betrayal in the
Mm,
place that you're supposed to be healing from
mhm,
the other betrayal, right?
mhm.
So just really harmful. And I think what I've seen too is that it just solidifies that sense of like, I can't trust anyone. I can't
Mm.
trust what I think. I can't trust how I see things. Who can I turn to for safety and help?
I think it's so hard because obviously, I mean, I would say 99% of therapists probably are doing this work because they want to help, right? So,
Mhm.
therapists
Yeah.
participating in treatment induced trauma is like horrifying. That's like the number one thing none of us ever want to end up doing. And yet, with something like infidelity, it's happening a lot, right?
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
something like, I don't know, trying to help her, like, okay, it seems like you're really spiraling over this and it's really time to try to move on somehow, like even things like pressuring forgiveness, or it really seems like you're hurting yourself even more by wanting to know these details. That's, I think, a good example of something that happens where it's like, oh, she actually has a right to know the extent of her injuries, and a therapist is over here like, I think these details are going to hurt you even more. Do you know what has hurt her even more is these behaviors. So it's not always, I think, those super obvious ones that we were kind of naming, but sometimes it's these little sneaky ways like disclosure, and the therapist is saying, I don't think this information will be helpful to you or something. And really, it's like, who's to decide that for her? She needs to be empowered in her choices.
It's so interesting because I feel like that's a very widely accepted practice in trauma treatment across the board is having the understanding. Like, I just think of my EMDR training and different, colleagues of mine that do trauma specific work. It seems to be widely recognized and understood that trauma work needs to be very client led. And it needs to be a lot about restoring agency, restoring safety. But for some reason, that doesn't always translate to a betrayal healing space, right? Especially in a coupleship. So, why?
Yeah.
you know, it's so interesting. I'm like, where's the gap there?
Right.
And it's, definitely has to be said that therapists can be so well meaning and so well trained, so qualified, but lacking that specific understanding that betrayal is a trauma, being
Yeah.
exposed to a secret sexual basement is a trauma. I think that's kind of where that we get that disconnect.
Can we talk a little bit about disclosure? Because I know that you also have a disclosure course, and you are the person to learn some of this from, for anybody who maybe hasn't had a disclosure, or they're even wondering what is a disclosure. I think this fits under this umbrella of treatment induced trauma because a mishandled disclosure can also be highly, highly traumatic for clients. So, anything you would maybe want to share on that as far as like how to make a disclosure feel safe and be safe for everybody?
Yeah, thank you. That's such a good question. Oh my goodness, disclosure is so delicate. I just like, oh, I just want to keep it so protected because
Uh-huh.
it is such a vulnerable place for each partner. Really, it is. extremely taxing emotionally, and most especially for a betrayed partner, right? This is new information to them, sometimes that they're finding out that day, sometimes that they've just found out recently. So I created a disclosure course because I felt like there was a little bit of, there can be a sense of gatekeeping some of this information about how our disclosure session goes or what should be included. Um, and I think, again, it's kind of that lack of understanding that betrayal is a trauma. And
Mhm.
so disclosure should be handled really carefully. And I've seen it and heard of it done really well. And I've seen and heard of it done really poorly. Uh, just having it be client led, especially for a betrayed partner, right? Really empowering them to be able to speak on what helps them feel safe, what information they need in order to make the best decision that they can in moving forward in the relationship. So, my disclosure course just goes over what is disclosure, how do you know if your disclosure is trauma informed and partner sensitive, and how you can ways you can advocate for yourself to have an effective disclosure as a betraying partner as well as a betrayed partner. Because I think one thing I underestimated prior to really learning more about formal disclosures is how impactful and important and healing, really, a formal disclosure can be for a betraying partner as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. When done well and trauma informed, all of those things that you're naming, it can be so healing. And I love what you said, Christina, about it being client led, because I think it's really easy and this is probably true for so many different professions, but I think certainly for therapy is your therapist also, yeah, we have these trainings and these credentials and blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
also, like, you are still the expert on your own life. Like, you, as the client, know yourself better than anybody, or you're like learning about yourself in that process. But I love that because sometimes I think a therapist can really come in and, like, this is the way that this needs to happen. But your choice and power, your agency through any process of treatment is so critical and so central. And I know my own self with disclosures, I can be pretty rigid with my disclosures because, like, I sometimes think of them as being surgical. I'm like, this is a surgery. We have to be really precise, right? Within that, there's still room for a client to have their agency because, um, like you named, especially for a betrayed partner, being able to return them to choice and power. They have lost so much power because of the things that are happening in their marriage. And the set of options now that they have, their choices are choices that they never wanted to be choosing from in the first
Oh,
place.
yeah.
Like, this is a terrible set of choices to have. And you still get to have some kind of choice through anything, whether that is through treatment, whether that is the decisions about your marriage or your own self. I think as a therapist, a really important part of our job actually is to help return people to their choice and power. Yes, we're quote unquote like in this expert role, but really you get to have the choice and power there. And I don't know if, what comes up for you there, what thoughts you might have on that.
Yeah, I love that. I do see my role so much and our role in the therapy space as returning people to their agency, and especially betrayed partners, betraying partners, feeling confident that they can access that and facilitating better access to it, right?
Mhm.
Which I think a lot of times includes information. Things have to be out in the open. We need information. We need to know what we're signing up for as we move forward with these choices.
Mhm.
So I love that you said that. And a lot of what I've learned about disclosure has been through facilitating good ones, sure, and trainings, sure, but also being part of some or facilitating some that did not go well
Of course.
or should have been more trauma informed. And so, yeah, I speak with humility on that, that I've learned what not to do. also.
This is sort of now sidebar, but you said something to me that I now say to clients all the time, but it was like the way a disclosure is written is a disclosure in and of itself. The way that the disclosure, the actual words in the disclosure, but also how long it takes somebody to write a disclosure, whether or not they're honest in their disclosure. And I name that too because a disclosure that has gone south, that's also not necessarily a treatment induced trauma situation. That's the therapist maybe allowing their client to have that agency, and they're trying to guide them to the very best of their ability. And I mean, there have been times where I've gone through and edited a disclosure where I'm like, we need to rework this part. Like, this needs to be completely omitted or whatever. And they'll fight to keep it in there. And I'm like, okay, that has happened. And, um, anyway, but I love that you have said that the way a disclosure is written is a disclosure in and of itself, because it's all information you're getting. Even when someone's not doing a disclosure, that is a disclosure. You are getting information. All of it is information, information.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one way to kind of know whether, right, this is a treatment induced trauma thing, or is this something where the person who's disclosing maybe is making choices about what they're open to disclosing, what they want to. Maybe they don't want to, aren't ready to come forward with everything. Is the clinician, right? The therapist or coach. How are they acting in a trauma informed way? How are they communicating expectations? How are they speaking openly about the process also, right? Like keeping each partner informed about what's going on. What is the process? Where are we at with preparation? How ready are we? What are some of the risks, right?
Mhm.
Like you said earlier, I love that you said that. It's so important. It's it's hard. It's big, disclosure.
It's big. And there are risks.
Yeah.
You should go into that process knowing what those risks are.
Mhm.
It's just like a surgery. That's why I always compare it to a surgery. I'm
Yeah,
like,
I love the surgical analogy. That is so good.
yeah. I'm like, yeah, your surgeon would walk you through the risks before you do something. And that goes
Mhm.
for our betraying partners too, right? Because
Yeah.
so often one of the fears that can come up there is, okay, if I do tell her all of this, if I'm really honest about all of this, we're actually in a good spot right now, and this is just going to set her back, all these things. Um, and that's a real possibility, actually, that this will set her back. And I would just say the injuries are not going to be because of the formal disclosure. The injuries are because of the behavior. So we have to make sure we are assigning responsibility to the right place. Like, the surgical procedure is not the enemy, it's the behaviors that happened in the first place that necessitated having a formal disclosure. But I love that you named that. Like, we've got to be really clear about the risks here. What are some of those other other things that you see as far as like creating that treatment induced trauma? Like, what are some things to kind of watch out for generally?
So one of the biggest things that can happen with treatment-induced trauma is just being helped by not the exact right person for the injury, right? And so when you have, like, I love Dr. Manwala's medical analogies. He's very into that, right? We have the hospital rooms that we go through. We talk about betrayed partners being in an ICU. So if you have a autoimmune issue, you're not going to see your kid's pediatrician for that. You're not going to see an orthopedic surgeon for that. You're going to see a rheumatologist or somebody who works with autoimmune diseases. And so, similarly, sometimes because the betrayal space is really heavily influenced by a strong Christian lens, sometimes betraying partners, couples will go to their ecclesiastical leaders as kind of like their first responders to, like, hey, this is what's going on in our relationship. This is what's going on in our marriage. Can you counsel us? Can you help us? And that can be such a healing avenue for a couple, but also there are limitations, right? So, really looking for somebody who is qualified, who has that trauma training, and is operating under that lens is super important. And so, one of the biggest things I've seen with treatment induced trauma is just being treated by not the right doctor, not the right person, right? For what you're dealing with. And so, it can be hard to access, hard to find, but will greatly impact whether or not you experience treatment induced trauma or what it looks like.
I'm so, so glad you named that because that really is the first thing is who's the first responder that I'm turning towards with
Mhm.
this, and we wanna make sure that it is somebody who knows actually knows how to help you. And so do you have an idea, Christina? Of course you do, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. What do people look for when they have discovered this and they're looking for help and there's a million different resources out there and it's so hard to know what's the exact right one and maybe like what are some
Mhm.
of the credentials you should search for or I don't know, like what how do you kind of guide people on what should they be looking for?
Overall, I would say somebody who has betrayal trauma training, a betrayal trauma lens. So, APSATS has a great model, multidimensional partner model. Dr. Minwala's model is the one that I primarily use, deceptive sexuality trauma model, right? Those are partner sensitive models, trauma informed models. But underneath all that, I think a therapist or coach who is operating in a space of high ethical standards and who is willing to learn when they don't know and willing to be a little transparent about that and then learn things. So, the real danger I see is when somebody who doesn't know just kind of barrels forward anyway, instead of saying, "Hey, I'm not exactly trained in this area," or somebody who feels like they're not exactly sure where to go in terms of treatment planning,
Mhm.
right? That's going to be indicative of just needing a little more information. And so, if somebody has that awareness to be able to say, "I don't have the training on this. I'm not exactly sure how to treat this," that is huge. So it
Mhm.
doesn't have to be somebody who's had 10, 20 plus years working with sex addiction or working with betrayed partners, but somebody who you feel safe with and somebody who is willing to learn and refer out when they are out of their scope is probably the most important thing.
I love that too because I I know personally I have been doing this work a long time, specifically with infidelity, and other forms of sexual betrayal. And in all of those years, no two cases have been the same. Everybody's story is so different. So having that willingness to really know your client and you will feel that like you will feel that from somebody. I really think in the first one or two sessions you're stepping into that office and you're feeling the safety with that person. I really think we can have a felt sense, and of course for betrayed partners, like you're hyper vigilant, you're on high alert, and also
Mhm.
I still think there's something in there that can tell you, okay, this feels like the right place for me to be. And I don't even know if I should say this, but I'm going to, even though we're on a podcast. Like, I think it's interesting, Christina, because a lot of people in our space have their own experiences with deceptive sexuality trauma. I noticed that. I mean, I noticed that a lot when I went through and got my CSAT training, which is certified sexual addiction training. I didn't know everybody's stories, but it seemed like there was a lot of people with their own personal experiences. And I think one, that can actually be a huge benefit, right? Because it is somebody who gets it very personally. They know the pain and the injuries and the impact. Um, and then two, I think there's definitely some downfalls to that. There can be. I'm not speaking like this is so general, right? But I think it's something to watch for. And obviously, you don't necessarily know what somebody's personal story is or looks like. But I think if somebody's bringing a lot of their own stuff in the treatment room, that is generally probably a concern. I am for a little bit of self-disclosure here and there as appropriate, I guess. I'm probably err way more on the side of not doing pretty much any at all. But I know some therapists will utilize that a lot, but I think when this has been part of somebody's personal story, sometimes that can really show up in the treatment room and they might have their own expectations. Maybe if it's somebody who chose to get a divorce because their partner cheated and that they're kind of guiding the betrayed partner that way, or it's somebody with their own history of acting out and they're really feeling like, oh, he's such a good guy and he's doing so much better. And why is she so angry about this still? And they're kind of projecting their own stuff. Therapists are human too. So that's I don't know. I just having done this now for a little while, I just know it's a lot of the therapists and coaches in this space have their own experiences with it. And again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's also not necessarily a good thing. Always. I don't know if you have any other additional thoughts on that, but I have just noticed that. And I think it's something clients should probably be aware of too.
Mm, yeah. I think one of the biggest barriers in us actually addressing treatment-induced trauma actually is our hesitation to acknowledge that there are limitations with that. Because with any kind of thing that you're going to therapy for, right? Let's say that we are in a space of working with teens who are experiencing high levels of anxiety. And 80% of the therapists treating teens who are experiencing high levels of anxiety have that as part of their story. That is going to impact how they're treated and not necessarily negatively, just something to be aware of. But I think that awareness and acknowledgement of, hey, there may be some limitations here is really important actually in us confronting treatment induced trauma. We have to be able to talk about this and we have to empower clients and especially betrayed partners to feel that they can ask those questions. Self disclosure is not really something that I am prone to do. However, I have felt more inclined to do so in response to client questions. Again, if we're working on how can we increase this person's access to agency? How can we give them more choice? We have a colleague, Laura, who I adore, who uses this phrase voice and choice. Help them
Mhm.
with their voice, help them with their choices, access choice. Um, if that's what we're doing, then we have to, me speaking personally, have to be comfortable being vulnerable when asked, is this part of your story? Is it not? What's your experience in this field? All of that. That's another way that we can be aware of staying away from treatment-induced trauma.
I love that so much. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Laura Fisher. If you are in Nevada and you need a
Shout
great
out to
therapist,
Laura.
shout out to Laura. She's amazing. But yeah, voice and choice. That's exactly it. Because for somebody that might feel really, really important to have a therapist who has personally
Absolutely.
through it. And I would just name for my own self right now, that has not been a part of my story in my marriage. And I know for me, because of that, I had to really extensively educate myself on betrayal, on deceptive sexuality trauma, on sex addiction, and the education that I have. A lot of it, of course, has come from, yes, the top down learning from, just digesting whatever, like experiencing it in my brain, but also years of sitting in the room with clients who have experienced this. That is where my learning has come from. And I would not have the information, the knowledge, the feeling that I have around deceptive sexuality trauma had it not been for these courageous women and men who have sat in the room and shared their stories and that I've really been able to walk through it with them. And again, like I think, for me, some of the advantages that I've experienced from that is that when I'm giving some kind of uh treatment or counsel or whatever it is, I would say pretty evidence-based. I take the things that work. I'm not taking, "Oh, here's what worked for me," and, like, "Try it on," or whatever, but it's like, this is well informed from the education and experience side of things. But for another client, that might be like, oh, yeah, I don't want to work with you because you don't know exactly what I'm going through. And I would also say there, nobody actually knows exactly what you're going through because your story of betrayal is unique and different. But every single person, if you have the capacity to empathize, like everybody knows the experience of heartache, of sadness, of grief, of anger, of massive loss, of abandonment, of neglect. We can all understand and pull something in us that can feel that kind of experience and that feeling. And so, anyway, I think, yeah,
Yeah.
just something to know. Hmm.
Yeah. I love that. One of my favorite things about you, Janae, is just that the way that you take that, like, witnessing experience into your advocacy, really, and how you work with clients, because that's one word that Dr. Manuela uses so much is just that witnessing word. And I actually think that acknowledging some betrayed partners are really going to want to work with somebody who has had that experience, and that is so important that they receive that if that's what they need and want. And also, one thing that I've seen not having walked that path myself is doing that witnessing work, sitting with and really empathizing has given me unique experiences and opportunities to help a betraying partner learn how to do that. Developing the skill of sitting with and witnessing
Hmm.
what it's like to be betrayed has provided me with, I think, a unique perspective maybe and opportunities to coach and teach betraying partners what that's like,
Yeah.
because I've not learned that from personal experience. I've learned that from witnessing and sitting with, just like they need to learn that from witnessing and sitting with.
100%. Absolutely. And also, you're not having your own triggers popping up in the room. Thank goodness for that. You're able to turn towards it and take it in a way that is therapeutic. Well, Christina, this has been so great. I'm just, there's been, there have actually been people that I have sent your way who have reached out to me specifically because they have experienced treatment induced trauma and pain from the therapist that they turned towards that they were really trying to get help from. And I just know that you really have created a lot of safety for the betrayed and the betraying partner in the room. And a big part of that is that you use accurate information and education. And I just think that is so intrinsically and inherently healing to have accurate information and accurate education from the person that you're turning to for help. And it sounds so obvious, but it's like we really need accurate information.
Oh, yeah.
Truth heals, right? I come back to that. I think it was Trish Haight who I first heard say that. It's just like truth heals. And yes, it does. Truth heals. And your office is a space filled with a lot of truths. And you are a person who turns towards hard truths. You're not scared. You'll call it, you'll turn towards it, you name it. It's a gift because I think it's hard actually sometimes as a therapist to tap into that alpha energy, name the thing that's hard that
So
nobody
hard.
about, So, I'm grateful that you do that. And you do it in a way that is kind and loving and gentle. And yes, people might feel shame when they're being held accountable. That's really normal. And also, that's not the same as shaming them, right? We talk about that all the time. Like holding somebody accountable, not the same as shaming them. And you hold people accountable in a really safe way.
Thank you. You're probably being overly generous. Um, but it's important. It's important. I take this very seriously. I take that environment and that space very seriously. And there have been times where we've had to regroup let's have an open conversation, right? Maybe it doesn't feel safe for everybody involved. Maybe there is a piece that I need some more development in. I need some more education in. Um, and so I'm grateful for, the people I've worked with that have been patient with me in that process. And also, yeah, it's serious. It is serious. This is a trauma. And so being educated, being informed, just like you said, it should be a requirement, really.
I think that part you just named is really important because this is a huge focus, obviously, of ours at our practice and our
Yeah.
other projects that we have going on. This is the thing we focus on. And also, we are always still learning and growing. And okay, wait, what else do I need to know to be able to treat this better and to be able to help here? And um, I think that's another quality to actually really look for in your therapist is just that humility and willingness to learn. Christina and I both ask for a lot of humility and willingness and accountability from our clients that are walking through this. And we also have to really practice humility, accountability, and willingness. And it's not always fun, you know?
It's not, especially when you're so specific in what you're treating, who you're working with. It can feel a little cozy sometimes. It can feel a
Mhm.
little cozy. Um, and yet super important to keep, like you said, just keep learning.
Keep learning, keep growing. Christina, thank you so much again for being here and sitting down and chatting about this. I think it's really important. And I think um, for clients and for us as therapists, just being more intentional and mindful. I just had one other metaphor that just popped into my brain, and this is a Dr. Manwala, but he talks about like, and I'm just going to share it because I think it's relevant. But um, he talks about if there's a car crash and you see a car crash, but you're not a person who's really capable of helping there. We want our qualified professionals to be the ones who are showing up on the scene of that car crash. The rest of us have no business going over there. I would, if I were the first one on the scene at a car crash, I would probably pass out. Like, that's not my forte, right? And so just really checking in with, okay, why am I turning towards this right now? Am I willing to go here? Am I qualified to go here? And that's yes for therapists, but also I think about that with spouses, even just having conversations with each other. Am I in a place where I am ready to turn towards this and show up and be present and develop the skills that I need to have to be able to do this thing? He explains that metaphor better than me, but I think about that a lot. Like, okay, who do we want at our who do we want our responders to be? And that's critical for not creating more injuries on an already traumatic situation. But
Hmm.
anyway, I appreciate you so much, Christina. Just for everybody, we'll take one more nice deep breath, kind of transitioning out of this space. I hope this was helpful for all of you to learn a little bit more about treatment induced trauma and just to check in with your own stuff. Like, is this working for me? Am I getting my needs met? Do I feel safe in the therapy room? If something feels off, that's not you being crazy. That's something to really pay attention to. And that might be, okay, I need to just have a conversation with my therapist, or I need to kind of check in on this with my own self or with my spouse or whatever. But just really pay attention to how you feel in the room. I'm going to plug for a second Kristina. So, yes, she is a therapist here at Desert Bloom Recovery in Nevada. So, if you are in Nevada, she's licensed here as a therapist. She can work with you if she has room. And also, if you're not in Nevada, she also has her courses and she's working as a coach. So there are multiple opportunities and ways to work with Christina. I will link her information in the show notes so that you can find her. And I'll also plug our program for women blooming beyond betrayal. It is a 90-day coaching container where you will be so supported, given all of the tools and support that you need as you are navigating this trauma and injury. So, thank you all so much and take care. We'll see you in the next episode.